Welcome to Chuck Builds. This is a video I've put off for a little while, and I'm going to just knock it out. It's going to be a little dirty, a little ugly, and probably not right. But we're just going to do it real quick because it's coming up a lot in the Discord. And this is about the LEDMatrix development. How would you make your own plugin for the LEDMatrix? I'm not a software developer. I don't have good practices, and the code is spaghetti code, but it's kind of working and I think it'll get better. But I'm really appreciative of everybody that has interest in getting involved and helping out, submitting PRs, fixing bugs, or even just letting me know if something is broken. We had an older version, version 1 and version 2 were rough, but it was a little bit more polished than version 3. Version 3, I'm trying to make everything as modular as possible so that you can call on some of these existing libraries and existing widgets and things in the code and use it in your own plugin. But by taking something that was hard-coded and then trying to make it modular and work in a more dynamic sense, it inevitably breaks things. Things get out of whack and the logic might get a little messed up, but we're working on it. We're trying to get better. And that's my preface that this might not work like you think it's going to work. I'm really not a software developer. I've been using AI for almost this entire project. You can kind of read what's going on and see the spacings and the math and the logic about what's actually happening there. And that's great for dialing in how things work. But some of the logic stuff I honestly don't understand, and I can just prompt my way through it. And there's probably going to be a situation where you're going to need to tell me that something's not working or that we need to PR, pull request something into the main branch to make your plugin work. I'm open to that. I just want to preface to you to please try as hard as you can to test it, troubleshoot it, make sure it works on different displays, make sure that as much as you can that we're not exposing something that's going to break something else. We're learning together. I'm going to get better as you get better, I think. So we'll see how that goes. To kick this off, you're going to need VS Code, Visual Studio Code. It's free. It's a Microsoft product. If you're on a different IDE, you probably know better than I do and know more than I do. So you're probably not watching this anyway. VS Code, kind of neat, kind of easy. There's a lot of documented stuff out there. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the extensions and we're going to get Claude Code. And we're just going to click install right here. Claude's like the best AI for code right now. It's kind of expensive. If you're serious about doing this, you're going to have to pay $20 a month is their cheapest plan. Hopefully you can knock it out pretty quick. I was paying for API credits on Cursor and it's just, I think this is better for me right now. So we have Claude Code installed. We'll go over here and we're going to need a folder. So we're going to clone a repository locally. So we're going to click on clone and then clone from GitHub. Going to have to log into GitHub and we can choose a repo. So this thankfully is choosing my repo. I think if it wasn't already set to mine, I think you could come in here and grab this URL. Let's try it. Come back over here, type in a link, press enter. Okay, choose a folder to clone this URL.get into. So this is where the file is going to live on your machine until it gets pushed around and edited. I made a folder in my documents just to store this. So we're going to put the LEDMatrix into this LEDMatrix development folder. You can put it in a GitHub folder. I already have it there, so I'm just trying to separate that. I'm going to clone the repo, and then we're going to open it. I'm going to trust the authors. I am the author, so I hope I trust it. Not too much crazy going on in there. And you have a get started with Claude Code. We're going to kind of maybe put that off for a split second here. And I'm going to come back over to the Explorer. We have the LEDMatrix folder. This has all of the code for the project. This is how it works. You can come through and read that. There's a big document section. Most of this is AI generated, but it should be relatively accurate on how things work and what's being referenced. And you can kind of just point to your AI to it and it should read it. How this is going to work on the device, just for context, is you have a plugin repos folder and then you have a plugins folder. When you are on the Raspberry Pi, when this folder that we're looking at, this LEDMatrix folder, is cloned onto the Raspberry Pi, which is a part of the installation script, the Raspberry Pi is looking at the plugin repos. Anything in the plugin repos, it is opening and loading. And then in the plugins folder, this was initially me developing plugins, and then I've since pulled them out of the plugins folder because I don't want to necessarily install every plugin automatically onto your Raspberry Pi. I think it introduces a lot of overhead. I want flexibility, and ideally there's hundreds of plugins available to you to install at your leisure, and we're not further slowing down the install and taking up a ton of space, introducing security concerns by automatically populating all of these files from third parties onto your Raspberry Pi. This plugins folder might eventually disappear, but what you really need to know is the plugin repos is how the Raspberry Pi, when it gets it from the store, it puts it into that folder. For testing, you might want to put it on here locally and you can run some tests. But what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the GitHub. We're going to go look at Chuck builds, and then we're going to look at the plugins repo. And we have a lot of plugins down here. And the one that we want is Hello World. And this is just an example plugin. This is just to kind of understand what's going on here. So we're going to come over here to local, and then we're going to grab this link, copy URL to clipboard, and then we'll go back to our folder where our LEDMatrix is. And we're going to open up in terminal, git clone, and then that URL, and it puts it right here in this folder. And we could have done this with the LEDMatrix. It was just convenient that it was there in VS Code. And we have this LEDMatrix Hello World right there. And then we're going to make one more. We're going to create a folder called LEDMatrix Video Example. We're going to go back to VS Code. We're going to come up to File, and then we are going to add a folder to the workspace. And we're going to add both of these. I'm just going to control click them and click Add. So in our workspace, we have LEDMatrix, LEDMatrix Hello World, and LEDMatrix Video Example. This is called a multi-root workspace, where each of the folders, it's this own Git repo. I can make changes to LEDMatrix and push that change, and it doesn't affect this one, LEDMatrix Hello World. And I can make changes to LEDMatrix Hello World and push this without having to update the main repo. That's the key part, is separating the repo for the plugin from the main LEDMatrix project. And I'm really not good at that. I've breaking my own rule many times on that, and there's going to probably be more of that in the future, but I'm hoping with more eyes on this, it'll get better. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at the Hello World plugin, just kind of as an example. You're going to have a configuration schema.json. This is what goes into the web interface. These are the settings that are there. And then we're going to have a manager.py, a Python file. And this is like the logic of what's going to go on the display. This is actually what's being drawn. We've got a message. It's being sent to the display manager. This is configurations we have about fonts and colors and sizes, and then loading the font. We don't really need to like understand all of it, but it's an example of how it's going to work. Then the manifest.json, this is important for installing it via the plugin store. You're going to be adding this as this repo to the plugin store. It needs to know what it's called, what version is it, who made it, what's it like, how to sort it. There's just some basic things that we need to do there. And you can probably just copy this and update the information in here. There's a couple of things that like downloads. I wanted to track downloads, but I didn't really know how. And then stars, there is a script for the plugin store that I run that updates the stars on the actual one. It's a whole thing I'm playing with. It'll be better or worse in the future. Not great. I don't know how to code, so I don't know how to explain this to you, but here's an example. And then we're going to have our video example that we're making right now. So I'm going to create a new file inside of here, and I'm just going to say plan.md. Markdown is MD, and we're going to kind of get started right here with this Claude button to open Claude. And GitHub has an agent over here on the right. I don't really know where that came from. I just noticed it, so I'm going to close that. We're looking at Claude, and I'm going to make a plan. So this plan is going to be, what are we working on? What do we want to make? So I think what I'm going to do is do a generic countdown or a count up. I'm not sure which one I want to do. I made on the LEDMatrix an Olympics countdown and a Christmas countdown, and there's probably a lot of personal reasons that anybody wants to make a countdown, so let's do that. So I'm typing a quick summary of what I want to happen. I want to make a plugin for the LEDMatrix project that is a user customizable countdown. I want the user to provide a date, name, and uploadable image. that the display will then use the current date to count down until the target date. I want the user to be able to make multiple entries, so you can have 1, 2, or 3 countdowns. I want the user to be able to enable options 1 and 3, or just 2, or have some optionality there. And I want to make sure that they can manage it from the web UI. Something else I'm going to call out is I want to reuse the image upload functions from, and I'm going to go back to GitHub. I'm going to go back to the plugins list, and I'm going to do the static image display because I've already tried to figure out how to upload file paths, and it's in here. Then I'll just throw in another piece of customization. I want the font size, the color, and the font itself to be user configurable. So now we're going to come over to Claude. So I wrote a prompt here. When considering the LEDMatrix video example folder, I want to make a custom plugin that will live as a Git repo and be loaded into the LEDMatrix project on a Raspberry Pi. Please reference the LEDMatrix project to ensure it will work correctly. I have my criteria and references in the plan.md file. And then I have a little, you can choose like a reference, the plan.md. And then we'll click the little orange arrow here to get started. And it's going to ask us some questions. Will you allow me to read these files? And I'll say yes. And now it's going to explore the LEDMatrix project and the static image plugin, and it's just going to start working. And it's going to be searching things. It's going to be looking for files, looking for examples, but it's not magic. You're going to have to continuously review what it's putting out into this folder. So the Claude code is still kind of working, and it's downloaded a temporary version of the image upload tool, and then it's creating a plan right now, a more in-depth plan for it to work through and creating this plugin, and it's just working away. So it's now asking to write the implementation plan, and we'll say yes, you can allow writing to this folder, and it creates this file here. And it's an in-depth markdown plan for the AI to start making this project. And you want to read this. This is very user readable. You can go through and see how it's going to work. Configurable settings, web UI, how's the files going to work? What do we need here? It breaks out the explicit widgets for file upload, and then we're going to need a unique UUID for each of these countdowns with some kind of examples, such as a birthday. And then it calls out the methods, and this is really for the AI to use, but it's nice that it's an option here, and you kind of get some flexibility of what you're expecting to see, and my head's still somehow in the way. You get a little bit of a mock-up. The image is going to be on top, then the text. With the way these displays are, usually they're more horizontal. So if I was seriously making this, I would say let's put the image to the left 1/3 and let's put the text on the right 1/3 or 2/3. But I just want to kind of show you that it writes 300 lines of what you need to know, and then what's next. How would you test it? How would you keep going through these things? And you'd come back to Claude and you come back to Claude and say something such as, let's make sure the image is on the left 1/3 of the display and the text is on the right 2/3 of the display. Otherwise, looks good. Let's build it. And it's just going to go. I mean, it's nothing too crazy. You're just going to keep prompting it. It's going to keep talking to you. We do have the ability to test the code in the developer. Not that easy. It's not that intuitive, and it's something I need to make better. So I'm going to say maybe let's ignore that for this video. There is the ability to emulate it on the screen. AI will help you do that if you really want to do that. I find it's easier just to copy it over via Git onto the display, install it, check the logs, see what happens. And again, it's just going. It's writing files, it's making them. We're getting the config schema for the web UI. It's got the manifest for the plugin store. We've got the plan that I wrote, the implementation plan that it wrote. And it's just going. It's getting started on the manager Pi and figuring all that out. And you're just going to wait it out until it says it's done and keep prompting it and ask it questions. It'll explain it to you. Ask it to draw me a diagram of how this is going to look. How will I change the font? What fonts are available? How will I know that XYZ? It's pretty good. I mean, I know there's a lot of like media around the AI and development and stuff. It's not taking a job from a senior level developer, but it makes Joe Schmo, me, being able to make some of these plugins and really just talk through it. You're going to hit your limits. You're going to take up a lot of time, but I think you can get there. So we're going to fast forward a little bit and pretend that this is done. And let's go see how to upload this into the LEDMatrix project on the Raspberry Pi. So I was about to demo with a different plugin, but it finished. It's done already. And so I guess we get to really see how well this works. That was pretty quick. And this is a file or a folder that's not actually a Git repo. So I'm going to say, let's make a Git repo for this project called LEDMatrix video example, and then commit and push so we can test on the Pi. And fire this off. It should actually do it for us. It might prompt to get your Git credentials first, but I believe I already have mine here. And it's going to ask permission to initialize the folder. And it's going to ask permission to create these files and go through all these steps. And it's going to go through, create some extra files for like git ignore, and then create a command here to take this folder and commit it to a new branch. Realistically, this is not a good use of your API credits. This is a lot of thinking, a lot of commands, a lot of context it's using. If you've never done it before, it's fine to prompt it, but this might be something that's better for like the VS Code freebie agent over here if they have an auto plan, just because it's not that complicated. The Git commands aren't that hard. The concepts are a little different, a little wonky at times. You can Google a lot of it. You can ChatGPT a lot of it. It's just nice that it does the commands for you. Ask for permission to create that repo. It actually named it something else, LEDMatrix Countdown, instead of the LEDMatrix video example, which is kind of funny. And then yes, to push to the remote origin. Gives me a little link right here. Let's see if it gives it to us at the very end. And so it's done, gives us some kind of like actually pretty accurate descriptions here. But we're going to get a link here for the GitHub URL. This is the repo it just created. This was uploaded 1 minute ago. We'll grab this URL. We're going to come to our LEDMatrix project, go to the plugin manager, and then once it loads, we're going to scroll down to the bottom, and we can kind of ignore the store loading. We'll scroll down to the bottom, and then we'll put the link right here and click install. It's going to start installing the plugin, and then it says it'll let you know when it's done and installed the countdown plugin. And so we can see here the installed plugins on this device. We're going to hit refresh to get that new plugin to load, and we'll come back over to plugin manager. And now that they're loaded, we can see we have our countdown display over here on the end of our settings. It's also here in our plugin manager. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable all of our other plugins. And I had these to test some features on the website. Make sure it's enabled, come down to configure. We have some things that we want to fix. List the countdown entries to display by commas. I want checkboxes, but I didn't say that. And that's kind of like, that's on me. You just got to go back and tell the AI, like, I want a checkbox. You have a fit to display, a preserve aspect ratio. This is all from the image upload, the static image plugin, but I don't actually see the upload button, and the countdown entries to display is not great. So I guess I'm just actually going to finish this in this video. Probably not going to happen. Going to dial it in. But we have the LEDMatrix countdown. We're this far along. Might as well finish it. And I'm going to say the image upload tool is missing from the plugin configuration web UI page. Additionally, the countdown management is just comma separated. I'd like an array table to configure multiple countdowns, enter the dates, assign the image to the countdown, and enable or disable the countdown. And you probably also want to add some logic about which one to display, and I want to have configurable times, and there's just a lot of things that go into these plugins and giving you the options that you want to have. The more options you add, the more complex it gets, the more bugs you introduce, the more testing you have to do. But with more people making stuff, hopefully we get some nice stuff in the future. I'm not going to actually record this because I'm going to go down a whole rabbit hole until this works correctly. But that's how you get it in here. And so let's say we did make these changes. I press enter, it sends off the command. We need to make sure you git commit and then git push to push these changes to the GitHub repository. And then in your display, you're going to come down to the update button, grab the latest update. It'll prompt you in the corner when it's done. Says it's already up to date or just updated in the new hash number, and you can come back over to your display and click restart the display service, and it didn't load. So you go, oh, I thought it was going to show up. What's wrong? You come over to the logs, scroll down, and it's going to give you an option. It's going to tell you what's going on as it starts up. And this one is, we had one of one plugins. The plugin was countdown, processing. We got no cycle duration. We didn't do high FPS, which is a thing you can enable if it's scrolling to try and make it not flicker. Switching to mode countdown, there's nothing here, and I think it's just going to keep cycling in the countdown. Despite the display being black, it actually is working in that it's loading the plugin. Most of the time when it's not working, you'll get a bunch of red messages saying error. It'll tell you what line the error is on, and it'll explain what's wrong / what it was expecting. And then you just kind of copy and paste, like, okay, if this was all an error, you just come in here, copy it, bring it back and say, fix this, and paste the error. And that's it. And you just keep going until it works, and keep going until someone in Discord says, hey, I don't have any issues anymore. So you have your plugin done. You have your repo. You're proud of it. You've worked on it for months. It's perfect. What do you do with it now? If you want it private, just take this and tell people to upload it manually. If you want to put a donate to you or me or whoever on there, you can do that. This is your repo. This is your plugin. I'm not asking for commission on this. I've got enough requests elsewhere for how these things work. If you want to run a Patreon and charge subscriptions for access to your latest versions, that's on you, man. I'm not managing that. I'd prefer you didn't. That's not really the joy of all of this. But if there's a reason that you're having to spend money for access or API keys or is providing a service, and that's an option you have. You have control of your repo. You can do whatever you want with this repo. All that I ask is, when you get to a point that you're like, hey, this thing is solid, this is good, people want this, I've tested it, it works without a problem, I have 10, 15 users that are using it, everybody says it's good, let's add this to the plugin store, reach out to me, message me on Discord, or come back to the LEDMatrix Plugins repo and open an issue. So you come in, create an issue, say, hey, I want to add a countdown plugin, say something like, hey, Chuck, I've created this plugin, it's verified working and tested on multiple displays, multiple users, can we add this to the store? Hopefully you add a few screenshots as well. Something I want to do is add screenshots to the store and then post a link, and you hit create on this. I'll see it, hopefully. Give me a day or two. If not, tag me, and I'll look at it. And what I can do is take that link and take your manifest, and I can add it over here to the plugins JSON. And each of these is how it shows up in the store. And so I have a script that runs like once a night to update the stars. The downloads, again, doesn't really work. The last updated, I think, works. And I'll just add your repo down here. I'll take from your manifest and drop it down and say the name of it, who did it, the author, I'll link to you, the category, the tags, all that's in your manifest. And so I'll just plop it in right here. And next time someone loads up their plugin manager and loads the store, it'll pop up in the store. I think it'll pop up at the bottom of the store. It's just in order, but I might need to do some kind of sorting or alphabetical there. But you can search for it until we make those improvements. Not bad, huh? Like, you can do this. If you have an idea, you could do this. Let's say you're developing a plugin, you want to add a plugin, you want to get other people to test your plugin. How are you going to let them know, or what's going on? We're on Discord. So come on and join over on Discord. I might be switching this up into its own Discord, depending if it gets big or not. But we have a plugins channel. Come talk about it. And there's some interesting links that I'll share when I see stuff that I think is interesting. This is one today. Terminal is an e-ink display, and they have a huge community of integration. And they've got hundreds of user-submitted integrations for their display, and literally 800 of these They won't work on the LED matrix because we don't have this many pixels, and their logic, I think, is different between the two. But it's really, really nice to have something to go off of and something to kind of see, like, how do they logic this out? Where are they getting their data from? And most of these are on GitHub, I believe. And there's lots of LED matrix projects out there. There's an NHL one that was the OG that I first got into. They have plugins now, and they have a whole community making them, but their whole thing is like using one display. So it's like super low pixel. Speaking of super low pixel, there was an app or a device called a Tidbit. This is what it looks like. Seems like they're out of business. Seems like they're totally bricked. Their store is unresponsive. So their community has come to GitHub and made their own list of apps. And you can get some inspiration here. And these are pretty nice because they're already more optimized for a lower display setting. Like, the code is here. You go back to the GitHub, all of these plugins that you just saw on that screen, they're up here in this apps section, but we don't use the same coding language. So a goal of mine, don't hold me to this, if you've watched this far, I guess you've earned to hear this. A goal of mine is to add native support for these star files. I don't really understand that. I don't know what it is, but I would like for you to be able to grab this link and upload it into the LED matrix and use their plugin as it works. Maybe we'll have a scale that it just scales out, just X2, X3, depending on the number of pixels. I don't know if it dynamically populates pixels, but there's a lot here. There's a ton of already existing plugins or integrations, and it's called Tron, and it's called TronByte apps. It's the former Tidbits community repo. I'm not telling you to steal these because someone else has made these, someone else has put in effort on these, but if you happen to be building a bus schedule display for your town and you want to use someone else's layout, it's pretty helpful to see how they did it. If you want to directly translate one of these into our LED Matrix project, I think you should call out their contributors and their people involved. Yeah, that's where we're at. This is a long video. Obviously, I'm not super skilled at this. If you're watching this, if you're totally off the street and you just want to make something, hopefully this gives you a little bit of confidence that you can do this. If you are a developer or you manage repos or you know this stuff better than I do, and I'm the first to admit it, my knowledge is very low, and you have a better idea or a better suggestion, please let me know. Please be proactive and make the change yourself. Don't tell me a better way to do it than expect me to go figure it out. Obviously, I don't know how to do it. Some of the stuff, yeah, you can tell me, but if it's something pretty far-fetched, let me know. And I'm specifically kind of like, as I'm recording this, I'm thinking this is interesting with 369 contributors and they have all of these apps in their own folders. I don't know if it's better or worse that way, I guess is a better thing to say. There's stuff out there. There's a whole world of existing LED matrix displays. We've got this TronByte, Tidbit, even this terminal GitHub stuff I think is super cool. There's some cool stuff out there, and I can't do it all myself. I'm going to slowly do the things that are the most interesting to me. But if you live on another side of this planet and you have a different set of goals for how you're going to use your LED matrix, go for it. This thing started out as just a way for me to see the Georgia scores or who we were playing next week, so I knew what to talk about at work. It's turned into so much more than that, and I'm loving that it's growing. I just really want to give power to the people. This video is going to be long as hell to edit. I'm going to stop talking. Hopefully this gives you some confidence that you can go out there and make this plugin for yourself, for however you want to do it. And then you can reach out to me when you're done and we'll add it to the plugin store. Thanks for watching. This is not going to monetize well at all. If you made it this far, go say hey in Discord. Say what's up.